Welcome to the broadcast, my dears. We are just going to be settling down for a bit of a chit-chat. I'm going to be going through some comments, and of course there will be a few royal matters to tend to as we go through proceedings. First, just a little bit of housekeeping here, and I don't mean this especially as a reprimand, but just as notice, because I've noticed, and a few viewers have noticed, that there seems to be a contingency, a very small contingency, of people who seem to spend their days and hours waiting for videos like mine to be published and then posting sort of cut and pasted generic quips, either regarding Harry and Meghan, usually Meghan actually, sort of humorous clips disparaging her, and some of you seem to like it. They conjure up lots of likes, but they get lots of attention, but they rarely have anything to do with my video and my content, and I find it a little bit sad, to be honest. I mean, who's got time to who spends their life doing that? So thank you for drawing my attention to it. The accounts I've noticed have been blocked, and I'll continue to do that. I know that you mean no harm if you're one of these people that spends your days doing this, but I'm afraid it's sado behaviour and it's not really welcome here. I don't expect every comment to be profound or full of substance, but it should be related to the video, you know, a little comment or observation or a reply or a question for me, something like that. But we don't need any generic quips that you're posting on multiple channels, that you seem to be lying in wait for people to post videos. This is sado behaviour and slightly inane, as are, I'm sorry to say, but comments that just say, "Hi River," or an emoji. You know, this is a waste of my time to look through. And I know that some of you doing that will mean very well, but you know, I don't care. Not for here, my dear. Let's not have inanity. Okay, that's just a little bit of housekeeping. Thank you to Lily N, who sent me this message and treated me to a coffee. Thank you, my dear. That's very kind of you. Lily says, would love to hear your thoughts on King Charles meeting the Black Ferns women's rugby team. I live in New Zealand and I go to the same exclusive gym as the rugby team. All the players came to a yoga class I attended and was so lovely. One of the players mentioned that they felt the king needed the hug more than herself.
A hug?
Yeah.
Why not?
It was amazing to meet the king. He's so lovely, and it was just awesome.
Also, I gave him a hug.
We got a hug, so.
And the king went on to say he found the experience was very healing.
I much appreciated this chance to meet you and to have such a warm hug from most of you. Very healing.
I felt that the moment was very sweet and it was a genuine Kiwi moment.
It was so lovely, it was so nice, and I didn't know you played rugby as well, which is pretty cool.
Love your work, River, sending love from New Zealand. Well, love to New Zealand, my dear. And indeed the king appeared to be full of zeal himself, didn't he, my dears, as he welcomed the Black Ferns to Buckingham Palace ahead of their Test rugby match against the Red Roses of England, and he expressed his condolences regarding the death of his friend, their indigenous king. And as for my thoughts on the hugging, because the press have been making a great big commotion about it, haven't they? It's lovely to see affection. It's always a joy to behold affection, and that was real and sincere. And both the king and the players of New Zealand were thrilled, weren't they?
I've been flattened by a scrum.
The point I will make, though, is the fact that that affection has always been there and it has always been on display. I think the difference is how these moments are captured now, because there is such saturation over the media, social media, the ticking, the talking, this sort of thing. Selfies, some actually taking selfies as they were pictured with the king. Are the official photographs and the video not enough? No, they need their own selfie taken with it as well. But actually it's nothing new. And I'm actually going to flash up a few images that I briefly Googled of Prince Charles as he was and the king as he is, doing some of this throughout his life, over and over again, in every single decade from the moment of his birth till now. I know Harry tells us he's a cold fish, but he seems to have shown an awful lot of warmth, which looked genuine and sincere and full of love to commoners and subjects and loved ones alike. So it's very peculiar, isn't it, how both the press and observers describe the royal family as buttoned up. I saw that only this morning in the press. Buttoned up and formal. Well, perhaps they are buttoned up and formal on formal occasions. You know, formal dinners, receptions, this sort of thing. The rest of the time, they're perfectly cosy, just like the rest of us, my dears. They've always been receptive. They've always been cosy, with the exception, of course, of the older generations. And the late Queen's way, of course, was keeping people at an arm's distance, and actually as cuddly and as cosy as I am. That would be my way, you know. Had William married me, that would be my way. But my way isn't everybody's way, you know. I get it. I've got it, and I'm good. So, Charles has always embraced all ages, all nationalities, or both sexes. Nearly said all sexes, but we'll stick with both, shall we, my dear? We'll stick with both sexes. Harry's recollection in spare of that moment that he was told that his mother had died by Charles, which, if you haven't read it, described the moment as no hug from his father when his father came into his bedroom. There was no hug, he wasn't held. According to Harry, though, from memory, forgive me if I'm wrong, from memory I think he said it was more of a sort of quiet moment and a sort of hand on the lap and maybe a pat on the back, and then he left the room, left Harry to his raw grief without a hug. Now, only Charles can ever verify that with his version of accounts, or rebuff that version of accounts, which he'll never do. But, you know, I can't imagine, despite his other betrayals and his foggy recollections, I can't imagine that Harry would blatantly lie about that moment, whether or not he remembers it correctly. But recollections do vary, and can vary, especially in the Harkle universe. If it is true that that is what happened, then, as I've said before, regardless of Charles's own upbringing, in my estimation, I'm sorry, that would be a failure of parenting. A failure of parenting. It would be utterly unnatural not to hold your child in that moment, which is hard for me to consider and confront. That was the most shocking part of Spare. For me, probably. Charles obviously knew what a hug was, as I've just flashed up and shown you in all the imagery. He knows how to hug people, and he's not a cold fish. So, if that were true, then that would fuck me up. That would fuck me up. If it had happened to me. Even if it happened when Prince Harry was 39 years old and 363 days, or whatever he is today. Let alone at the age of 12. That aside, because we can't take Harry's word as truth, that aside, Charles is a warm and tactile man, and that has been illustrated this week as ever, and it is a shame that he will be missing the chance to explore more of New Zealand when he makes his tour later on in the year. It's next month, actually, isn't it? He'll have to skip New Zealand on doctor's orders. Really? Why? I'm sure they have their reasons. But it is a great shame, because he's obviously different from what they tell us. He's obviously very much admired and enjoyed by the people of the Kiwi nation. And we love a good Kiwi fruit. We also love our Prince of Wales, who was showing off his new beard in full uniform for the first time as he undertook military duties on behalf of the King. And this was at the Sovereign's Parade of RAF Cranwell for an officer's graduation ceremony. And he was accompanied by the sister of the late Diana, Aunt Sarah, or Lady Sarah McCorkadale to commoners. She lives just 15 miles away from RAF Cranwell, so she was there to show support, apparently. Now, I also heard whispers that she wants to make it known and make it clear that the Spencer family are not Team Harry. They are not exclusively showing love only to Harry, because there's been so much rumblings about this in the press lately. It is now clear. Both of Diana's boys are loved and supported by the Spencers. And Prince William inspected the graduates in his wing commander's uniform, and he took the salute before handing out prizes. And by the way, did you see that Prince George has now started taking flying lessons at the age of 11 years old? So we have another royal pilot in the making. From kiwi fruits to the fruits of Nigeria, the delicious fruits of Nigeria, we have tidings from Rotimi Adewunmi. And I'm going to call you Timmy, my dear, because I've got a friend with the same name and we call him Timmy. So I hope you don't mind, but that's what I'm going to call you. Timmy dear says, River, I went to prep school in the UK from age of 8 in the 70s, then one of the best public schools in those days, Clifton College, Bristol, and then the LSE, and worked in the UK for another 20 years before returning to Nigeria. I mixed with all strata of society. My late dad actually attended the pre-wedding dinner for the late Princess Diana, hosted by the Duke of Gloucester. Now that's out of the way. Please don't waste time on dimwits being outraged by the fact that, as you stated, the video was very well made and it conveyed the Princess of Wales's message, but effectively it wasn't to your taste. That's fine in my opinion. The world isn't a police state. Oh, I'm not so sure, my dear. Not anymore. Well, as you say, mind you, here in Nigeria it feels like it. Ignore the scallywags who rant over nothing. My dear Timmy, I only pay the scallywags attention because it benefits me. And it gives me a little bit of enjoyment. If it didn't do either of those things, then I wouldn't do it. As an aside, it is about time us Africans quit blaming colonialism for our abject poor governance failures and take responsibility for our future and that of future generations. Malaysia was colonized, so was South Korea, Vietnam. Why have they moved ahead of Africa, even though in the 60s many African countries were far ahead of them economically? We should look in the mirror and accept our failures and fix our problems. South Africa is a perfect example. After dear Mandela died, after his one term, the country went kaput. Graft and corruption started to reign. Keep up your good work. I suspect, and this is funny, that's where you made me chuckle, my dear. I suspect I may have seen you at Trade or Kinky Galinky in the 90s. The shade! The shade. Mind you, I'm in my late autumn years, 59. Well, if you're 59, my dear Timmy, then you are not in your late autumn years. You are in your early to mid-autumn. You've still got another 15, 16 years of autumn season to go. 59, but still working it, I'm sure you are. As for Ngozi Fulani, I will send a comment one day. She is a complete and utter disgrace. Well, thank you sincerely from your comment. You echo a lot of what African people tell me in the comments all the time, and you have the dual experience of living in Africa and here in the kingdom, which is very valuable. And just on your point about the nightclubs of London, my dear, and whether you spied me in them, you mentioned Trade and Kinky Galinkies. Well, I knew of Trade. I had a boss at one time who was what's known as a Muscle Mary. And he would come in after some real all-nighters at Trade, gurning and chewing. This was a very successful man, by the way. Gurning and chewing away, he usually had a new lover in tow. He was a Muscle Mary, my dear, a professional Muscle Mary. So I knew of Trade. Now, I possibly went there just before it closed. I've got a vague recollection of perhaps a Sunday at Trade at some point. Kinky Galinkies, well, that made me smile just because I've heard so much about it. I never went to Kinky Galinkies, no. I've seen footage of it on YouTube. Very, very 90s. Very, very 90s, isn't it, my dear? I heard a great deal about it. I expect you enjoyed a bit of Handbag House too, as well, my dear. John of the Pleased Women, The Velvet Room, or was it The Velvet Underground? Interesting. But you see, one day I'll tell you more about my adventures in night clubbing. But I've always been deeply involved with the club kids, the club culture, because a lot of my life has revolved around the DJs and the decision makers, the fashionistas, the glitterati, this sort of thing, you know. But I was never on the gay scene. So you mentioned Trade and Galinkies, for example, from your era. Well, I was never on the gay scene. Of course, I've been to loads of gay clubs and gay bars, but I never focused on the gay scene. It's not my cup of tea. did go to heaven, so perhaps we brush shoulders at heaven, my dear. And GAY, that was another one. But my beloved playgrounds, which I might discuss in future, maybe if I feel like it, did not involve gay clubs. It was a mixture of everybody all together, really, but mainly straight. But because I've always mixed with the DJs, the musicians, the producers, residents of clubs like Fabric, this sort of thing, editors and writers, Mixmag, Jockey Slut, ID, The Face, yada yada yada, my dear. You know, I've always received an education about, the history and places like Kinky Galinkies. So thank you for bringing a smile to my face, my dear. It sounds like the clubs you like were the clubs that are a little bit more spangly than me, all-nighters. I was never into that dancing and stomping away all-nighters. Some of my friends involved certain pills, star-spangled pills, should we put it that way, my dear? And I'm not saying that I never had a spangly moment, or 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, but me and my homies, my gals, you know, we are more the type that enjoys getting ready together before hitting the clubs or the disco. You know, we take our time getting ready. The fizz comes out, maybe 1 or 2 other things come out. Then we trot down to the club around midnight, party for a couple of hours, pose and vogue, and enjoy ourselves in that way, have a bit of a wiggle. Then it's trotting back to the DJs, or trotting back to the after parties, or Katie Moss, or, this sort of thing. It's about the pre and the post parties, my dear. That's what it's all about. And the actual club is fabulous, but more of a distraction in the middle. That's the way it works. Not really these all-night marathon stompers. That's not really my cup of tea. Many chime with your comments, my dear Timmy. The comments you left me. Many. I've had so many comments over the years from juicy black fruits of the Commonwealth and beyond, saying the same thing, telling me that Africa can be romanticised by others, especially white liberals in many circumstances, as some sort of liberal haven. Which is nonsense on stilts, isn't it, my dear? You know it, and as well as I know it. They don't seem to know it. Kemi Badenoch knows it. And I spoke of this when Kemi Badenoch emerged as a prospective Conservative leader. And it's one of the reasons I championed her before anybody else. She tells us how right-wing Nigeria is, how conservative it is. And the type of conservatism and right-wingedness that is actually less about freedom, despite the beauty of the nation. As you tell me, more and more like a police state. Well, Africa isn't the only place it's getting like that, because it's absolutely happening here and across the Western world. We're following in those footsteps, my dear. But it is very refreshing to hear voices that don't just pile on to colonialism and the vagaries of it, the regrettable episodes of it, of the past, because it would make people feel better, and they can virtue signal about it and prompt other nations into feeling guilty. It's always refreshing to hear the voices that don't pile on just because they can. And as you say, accept a share of the responsibility, especially when it comes to moving forward, having the new opportunities and chances in life. Other countries have taken it and run with it, others don't do as well. And then they want to find somebody to blame, or reparations, this kind of thing. And having lived in both worlds, as you have done, and not just in a sort of dilettante fashion, popping in, getting what you can, and then popping off again, you've actually lived here, embraced the lifestyle, danced to Kinky Galinkies, had a spree, and truly embraced the life here, as well as the life there. That is why your comment is very valuable. The Duchess of Edinburgh presented an award at a British Fashion Council event heralding the start of London Fashion Week. The Queen Elizabeth II Award for British Design was presented to menswear designer Stephen Stokey Daly, at the Royal Academy of Arts. She wore a silk blouse by Frame, trousers by Vicky Beckham, and her Jowler Catherine clutch. And Prince Edward joined her at a luncheon for representatives of their patronages based in Northern Ireland at Hillsborough Castle, and afterwards they attended a garden party given by the Secretary of State. Actually, I didn't really enjoy the yellow number she was wearing together with the dark blue veiled and netted headband. I didn't enjoy it. She looked divine, of course, she always does, but especially when she popped on that coat in the cornflower blue, it was too reminiscent of Easter for me. For me, it was more edging towards a springtime look, especially on this day where rain fell, actually, and they had to take cover in the various marquees there. But of course, she was still very royal and very pretty, and there were 1,000 guests making up the numbers, and there was a traditional tree planting ceremony. Fip62 said, "How I'd love to be a fly on the wall, Shay River. Imagine the gossip one would hear. Love hearing your admonishments. As long as I'm not on the receiving end, mind you." Well, I'm not kinky in that respect, my dear, or else I would have made a good dominatrix, don't you think? Dressing people down, I could have made a career of that, had I had some sort of bent towards it, but that's not my cup of tea, my dear, I've got to tell you. Sorry to disappoint, but sorry to hear your school days weren't happy, but I'm guessing those experiences have shaped the person you are now. Strong, sassy, self-assured, and a bloody scream. Thank you for the nice comment, my dear. Well, as for school days shaping me, I might have given it before, but I have an analogy of the school corridor. For those of you who had a hard time at school and lived in fear of the intimidation and violence as I did every single day for over 10 years, you'll remember the fear of the school corridor, between classes, where everyone's lining up outside the classrooms and you have to wend your way through all the corridors, and people try and trip you up or call out names. And of course, at that age, everything's excruciatingly embarrassing, isn't it? You don't want people calling you out and drawing attention to you. It's just hideously painful and terrible. And yes, those moments do shape one, and they shaped me, because it's at those moments you either surrender and go under, but feel the sense of shame that they are trying to inflict upon you and become a victim. I will die a victim. I'm not one of these people that says I'm a survivor. I am a victim of those people that intimidated me throughout my school years. I will die a victim of that. It's had repercussions throughout my entire life, even though the qualities that it imparted in me, because I was able to sort of rise up from them and emerge phoenix-like from the ashes. So even though it has a flip side, which has been positive, it doesn't mean that I deny that I am a victim, but I wear it as it is. It's neutral. It's not a good or a bad thing. It's just a thing, if you will. But on another level, I didn't just surrender and become a victim in the school corridor. I physically rose, and I didn't cower. And one could also say that it gave off the impression of aloofness, born out of fear at the time. But it did, and it gave me a self-deprecating sense of humour. It was my humour that helped me deal with it, because I knew that I was fabulous. They were never going to tell me that I wasn't. Most of the boys, intimidating, scary boys that were on at me, wanted to fuck me too. Which was blatantly obvious, blatantly clear. They still sniff around me these days to try and get a bit, and they're not having any of it. But, I knew, I was plugged onto it. I could see the psychological insecurities and fears of their own, the ones that harassed others at school. The ones that perhaps didn't come from such loving, healthy families. I could sense and sniff out their own insecurities, my dear. But yes, it gave me a sense of humour, because I learned from an early age that it wasn't going to be plain sailing, and that if I wanted to retain my sense of self-esteem and self-respect, then I was going to have to bear in mind that what I had was a cut above what they had. They might be able to rule by fear and intimidation and in groups and in crowds, but I could sense and intuit that actually that was their weakness and that what I had was real strength, or at least stronger than what they had. So as a tool for getting over the embarrassment and the humiliation that comes with these sort of childhood incidents and the corridor tripping up, this kind of thing, one would raise an eyebrow. That's how the camp eyebrow became raised in the teen years. And that is how, when one couldn't fight with fisticuffs, or one would develop the tongue, my dear, the musculature of the tongue, the acid drops. And as I progressed in years and through school, there were more than one or two moments where I was unable to floor one or two of the others with a punch to the face, but I was able to floor them with a put down or two, or three or four. Yes, there were some real juicy moments there, my dear, where I humiliated them in front of many people with my words. So I was able to whet that particular knife and brandish that as a weapon, for good or bad. So if you describe me as strong and sassy and self-assured and a bloody scream, then part of that does come out of that journey at school. Now, I did mention that school days were full of fear for me, but I would also like to make it clear, which I didn't last time, that the memories of school also conjure up many happy moments, many happy friendships, many happy days. I have many precious memories from school time. It's bittersweet, like much of life. It was a bittersweet time where there was always the shadow of fear in the background, but they were truly the best days of my life. The childhood, I can remember my grandfather saying to me, the best days of your life, like they always do, don't they? And thinking, what is he on about? Now I absolutely know that they were. You had that wonderful security of everyone you know and love being young and not experiencing some of the tougher challenges in life. Everything sort of sun-dappled or snow-blizzardy, cosy summers that go on forever. Trotting down with your fellow school children to the Harvest Festival at church. Wonderful, wonderful memories I have there. So, there were miserable moments for sure, but it was not a miserable childhood. So I want to make that very clear. There was much, much joy. I'd give anything to go back there, especially knowing what I know now. I really would. And when you say that I would be a bloody screen to hang around with, well, if ever there was to be some sort of legacy, I don't want to be remembered. I don't care about being remembered. But if I was, I would hope that it would be as good fun and good company, a little bit naughty and very gossipy. And on the same theme, Constructive Fashion says, "Hi River, such eloquence about your confidence journey," on the previous broadcast. "My siblings almost destroyed me when my mother passed. Father had a stroke. I lost a foundation. Maybe subconsciously I am drawn to the royal story, who knows? But you say to try and do better each day. I love that, and I will try better with my dragon lady boss." Well, respectfully, my dear, I reject your compliment that I spoke eloquently in the previous broadcast about confidence, because when I watched it back, I realised that I left out the main thrust of what I was trying to get over, although I will say I did receive some lovely compliments and comments from those of you that enjoyed my words on confidence and how I obtained a sense of confidence. Katie Taylor and some others said that she was reduced to tears in that segment, so thank you, that's really nice. But I failed to actually pinpoint to you how those challenging jobs that I said instilled confidence in me, how they actually induced that confidence. And I meant to say that it was because the roles that I was being given were increasing in responsibility, and I needed more pluck to get through those roles. I was dealing with contractors, with traders, with lots of staff who were coming to me as a point of contact. I was leading teams more and more, and I was dealing with more executives in high positions, and so it was a sort of do or die period of my life where I had to become tougher and steelier and more stoic, or I would have gone under, you know. I had to become a bit of a bruiser and less people-pleasing. More ruthless, actually. And that is how I emerged from those roles. More well-rounded and assertive. I think assertive is the word, and more self-assured. So I just wanted to clear that up. From the 18th to the 26th of October, the King and Queen will visit Australia and Samoa and attend the Commonwealth Heads of Government Meeting 2024. Their programme is going to include recognising Australians in the fields of health, arts, culture and sports, paying respects to the war dead, learning about bushfire combat, and attending a barbecue to experience the cultural diversity of Australia. In Samoa, they will receive a ceremonial welcome, visit mangrove forests in a national park, join a pastor's school to witness how pupils are taught to read and write, and the Heads of Government meeting will bring together 56 countries, and their majesties will host a fancy dinner and further receptions. I heard that the term walkabouts has been dropped from this tour so as not to offend the indigenous communities, because apparently in the Aboriginal culture, walkabout means when a person travels on foot into the bush in times of ritual, meditation, change, grief or coming of age. Well, thank you for sharing this walkabout with me, my dears. I look forward to seeing you next time. Do leave me a lovely juicy comment. And if you'd like to treat me to a coffee, my tip jar is in the description box. See you next time, my dears. Take care and toodle pip.